In this video, we're going to be talking about naming ionic compounds. And the whole reason why we're doing ionic compounds first is because they are a lot more simple, I think, and they only get confusing when you start mixing them up with the other concepts that we learn about other things. But I just want to introduce ionic compounds by themselves first, because by themselves, they are very, very simple. And we're going to illustrate that here. And so before we introduce these other concepts that have prefixes and other things that might be confusing, we're just going to remember that there's no prefixes. It's literally all you do for an ionic compound is we are going to have the name of the first element and then a space, a name of the second element, but we're going to cut off the ending and replace it with IDE, IDE. So we could do actually the first example would be the most common ionic compound that we are probably familiar with would be like NaCl. And you probably heard me say before, or other people say, that this is sodium chloride. And notice that we have the first element's name in its entirety, and then we have the second element. We cut off the ending, so instead of chlorine, we cut off the ending and replaced it with ide. So sodium chloride is NaCl. Let's try another one. And feel free to pause the video and attempt at any point and attempt these on your own, and then use this video to double check these. Check your own work. So lithium bromide is the second one. We have LiBr, so lithium. And then just like before, we had lithium and bromine, and all you're going to do is cut off the ending and replace it with ide. Lithium bromide. Let's try another one. We have calcium and fluorine here. Guess what we're going to do? We're going to put the first elements down, calcium. Then we're going to put the second element down, fluorine, except we're going to cut off the ending and replace it with IDE, fluoride. All right, let's try this one. K2O. We have potassium here. And then we have oxygen. And this one might be a little bit more difficult because you're trying to figure out where we kind of cut off the ending. So we're going to actually cut it off here. So it's going to become potassium oxide. So I think the hardest thing with ionic compounds is figuring out where to cut off the ending. But once you do a few, you figure it out and you kind of get used to how it goes, and it's not too hard after that. So potassium oxide. Let's try this one. Al2O3. We have the first element is aluminum. The second element is oxygen. And we already learned from this example where to cut off the ending. So we're going to cut off the ending here and write oxide, aluminum oxide. Let's go ahead and do another one just because. Let's try magnesium. Sulfide, MgS. So magnesium. Just so we can figure out where to cut off the ending is my purpose here. So and then we have sulfur. But we're going to cut off the ending and replace it with IDE, magnesium sulfide. So as we keep doing more examples in class, you're going to see where we're going to cut off the ending and replace it with ide. But that's all there is to it for ionic compounds and naming them. You just put the first element down and then put the second element down and cut off the ending for the second element and replace it with "-ide". Notice that for some of these examples, like calcium fluoride, I have 2 fluorines here. But for ionic compounds, that's not going to matter because there's no prefixes for ionic compounds. We'll describe in our next video why we don't need prefixes for ionic compounds, but let's just make a mental note that no matter how many of each element we have in the compound, we are not going to use prefixes because there's absolutely no need to do so inside for ionic compounds. And that's what makes them a little bit easier to name, in my opinion.